Back in May 2019, four Clark County, Indiana judges decided that they would go to Indianapolis to attend a statewide educational conference for judicial officers. Sounds pretty formal, right? Well, Clark County, Indiana is right across from the Ohio River. So these sitting judges would have been closer to Louisville, Kentucky than they were to Indianapolis, Indiana. Clark County, Indiana has a population of maybe 125,000 people, and Indianapolis, a population of maybe 1 million people. So it seems like these four judges decided that this trip to the big city would also be a mini vacay. Less than 12 hours before this educational conference for judicial officers, wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Was about to begin. The four judges are roaming the streets of downtown Indianapolis drunk off of their asses. And they go to a strip club, the Red Garter, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. The Red Garter is closed. They can't get in. And so, like a lot of people after a night of drinking, they decided to get something to eat, and they ended up at a White Castle on South Street. Magistrate William Dawkins, he went inside of the White Castle, and that left Judges Andrew Adams, Sabrina Bell, and Judge Bradley Jacobs. They're out in the parking lot, and Sabrina Bell flips her middle finger off at two men in an SUV, and these two men respond by pulling into the White Castle. Inside of the SUV is Brandon Kaiser and his nephew, Alfredo Vasquez. And unbeknownst to the three judges in the parking lot, well, Brandon Kaiser has a gun. A weapon was not pulled immediately, but what did ensue pretty quickly was a fist fight. A drunken brawl is what the newspapers called it, and there's no other way to describe it. Judges Andrew Adams and Bradley Jacobs are in a parking lot brawl, fisticuffs with Brandon Kaiser and Alfredo Vasquez. Where is Judge Sabrina Bell, who got this all started by flipping off Alfredo Vasquez and Brandon Kaiser as they were driving by? Well, she's hiding in the parking lot. And good thing, too, because Brandon Kaiser pulled a gun and he fired it. Judges Andrew Adams and Bradley Jacobs were both seriously wounded. Jacobs was shot twice in his chest, and Adams was shot once in the stomach. From wherever she was hiding in that parking lot, Judge Sabrina Bell called 911, and after police and ambulance arrived, Andrew Adams and Bradley Jacobs were rushed to the emergency room where they would survive and eventually testify against the shooter, Brandon Kaiser. There was a public consensus from witnesses and from video that it was the judges who instigated the brawl, not only by Sabrina Jacobs flipping off Vasquez and Kaiser as they were driving by, but that the judges actually initiated the physical brawl. And get this, the judge who sentenced Brandon Kaiser said that Kaiser pulled the gun because Judges Adams and Bradley were winning the fight. That's right, the judges were beating asses that night, not the other way around. Even though it was Judge Sabrina Bell who initiated contact by flipping off Kaiser and Vasquez who made a really bad decision. By the way, I think everybody in this situation was drunk, okay? You know, who made the fateful decision to pull into that parking lot in response to being flipped off by Judge Sabrina Bell. Well, it was Vasquez and Judge Bell who were trading insults in the parking lot. But it was all of the men who ended up into that drunken brawl. And it would be the three men who would eventually see some sort of consequence from the brawl. Sabrina Bell, she's going to walk away from this scot-free, because even though she said in the 911 call, quote, "I feel like this is all my fault," unquote, well, when it came time to explain her behavior, she said she was drunk. She had absolutely no memory of the incident. Well, you take yourself wherever you go, and Judge Sabrina Bell would eventually end up losing her seat as a judge because she was criminally charged in a completely different, totally unrelated incident. Magistrate William Dawkins wasn't charged with anything, and he did not receive any type of discipline from the Judiciary Committee because he was inside of the White Castle during the entire incident. And I don't know about you, but I think that's fair. He didn't even get a public intox charge. Judge Sabrina Bell and Judge Bradley Jacobs, they were not criminally charged, but they were disciplined by the Judiciary Committee, and they were both suspended without pay for 30 days. Despite this drunken ball, the 30-day suspension, Judge Bradley Jacobs would go on to win re-election in 2020. So I guess the public does forgive. Judge Andrew Adams was criminally charged, and he was disciplined by his board, suspended 60 days without pay. His criminal charge, he pled guilty, and he was sentenced to 365 days in jail. He served 2. The 365 days was suspended, and Jacobs was given 1 year probation. Now, he did run for re-election in 2020. He was not successful. Vasquez pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery, received 1 year probation, and presumably went about his life. As for Sabrina Bell, well, she also ran for re-election for her seat as a judge in 2020, and during her re-election campaign, she was charged with felony domestic battery in the presence of a child under the age of 16. The drunken brawl happened May 2019, and May 2020, Judge Sabrina Bell is also running for re-election for her seat as judge. And in the midst of her re-election campaign, Judge Sabrina Bell was charged with felony domestic battery in the presence of a child under the age of 16. Sabrina Bell decided she had pushed her luck enough, and she started copping pleas. She made a deal with the Judicial Disciplinary Committee that in exchange for them not investigating her felony domestic battery charge in the presence of a child under the age of 16, that she would resign her judgeship, that she would not ever, ever, ever run for re-election as a judge in this life, and her license to practice law was suspended for 150 days on the condition that Bell complete an exam called the MPRE, the Multi-Professional Responsibility Exam. It's actually not very difficult. Bell copped a plea on the criminal charge, too. She agreed to a pretrial diversion. I don't know the details of her specific pretrial diversion, but usually a pretrial diversion says that if you don't get into any kind of legal trouble for an prescribed amount of time, then you don't have to face the original charge. And her original charge is domestic felony battery. Brian Kaiser faced 14 counts, and at least 4 of those charges was felony aggravated battery. He took it to trial, and in that 3-day trial, Kaiser, he defended himself by saying that the shootings were in self-defense. Kaiser was sentenced to 8 years, and he was sentenced to at least, I believe, 6 years probation. Kaiser, he did show remorse at the sentencing reportedly, and said that he had been in alcohol treatment since the incident. If you stuck with me this long, thank you. Do me a favor, hit the like button and drop me a comment. I'd like to know what you think. Should Brian Kaiser have received 8 years, or should he gotten off for self-defense? Drop me a comment. I'd love to know what you think.